everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for Let's Chat. My name is Shayla Reeves, and today we're going to be talking about a topic that really touches a lot of folks. If it doesn't touch you, maybe it touches someone in your family, a close friend, a close person in your network of contacts. But divorce is something that's real. It's something a lot of families have had to navigate. And I wanted to have this conversation with some folks that could really offer some insight, advice, tips, tricks, tools for navigating that space of not only divorce, but also trying to create a co-parenting relationship that works for you, your ex, your child, and everyone involved. So joining me for this conversation today, we have Alicia Price with the Price Dynamic. She will be offering some insight. I'll let Alicia tell us a little bit more about her specialty and her work in just a moment. And then also we will have a few tips and some insight from Liz Steen. She was going to be with us today, but she had a family emergency. So I've been able to take some of the tips that she offered, and I'll pop those up on the screen throughout the conversation, and we'll try to create some conversation points around those. We will drop the link shortly. So if you would like to join in this conversation, if you would like to offer some insight or something in your own personal experience that this may resonate with you on, just drop it down in the comments. We'll pop those on the screen. And if you have any questions, Alicia will certainly be able to help navigate and answer the situation that you might be dealing with. So Alicia, I'll go ahead and start with you. Tell me a little bit about you. I know this is an incredible season for you. If folks have been watching certain show on television, they've probably seen you make a few appearances in the last few weeks. We'll go ahead and let you tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll launch into our conversation from there.
Yes, well, thank you so much for having me. Again, Alicia Price, CEO and founder of the Price Dynamic. And I am coming at this topic from a very unique space, an authentic space, because I am the product of a successful co-parenting dynamic. And then when my family came about, I became a single mother and also worked very hard at co-parenting. And because I had that foundation of watching my parents work to get along for the sake of me and putting me first, I knew how to do that when my family dynamic changed. And so I love to work with families around just kind of finding their way, finding their groove around what co-parenting can look like, and or whether or not co-parenting is the right type of solution for them. And it's exciting to be able to now work with other families around something that's so near and dear to my heart. So
that's wonderful. And thank you so much, Alicia. And the reason I thought this was such a great conversation to have, you kind of reached out, you told me about the work that you're doing. And I said, oh my gosh, this is a great conversation. While it may not necessarily touch my life, that's the beauty and the value of creating space for conversations like this one, so that hopefully opening up this space, we push somebody watching forward in their journey of divorce and co-parenting. So to start this conversation, for those folks that maybe are in this space or newly in this space, and they're trying to figure out, like, where do I start? What do I do? This is new. This is unfamiliar. What do you tell those folks when they're sitting in that seat in front of you for the first time? Where do they start?
Yep. A great place to start is really getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. People want their family dynamic to be fixed immediately, or they want, that uncomfortable feeling to go away. And you have to actually work through it. You can't just jump over it. So the reality is you have to really be ready to do the work. And that means getting uncomfortable. The other thing that I like to share with people is that co-parenting is not just as a result of a broken home or a divorce. And I think when we come to the realization of that as, a community, a society, then co-parenting becomes more normal. So I do also work with parents who are married and living in the household, but recognize that one parent is doing a little bit more than the other, or they're not quite on the same page about what parenting looks like or how to discipline and structure their family dynamic. And so that also requires co-parenting. So I like to, open the definition a little bit for people, because I think sometimes folks get a little stuck when they think about co-parenting as a result of a divorce.
And sometimes people, maybe I would imagine they may get stuck in the feeling of I failed, or there's something wrong with me is why we're here. And I could see negative thinking probably keeping you in a space where creating the kind of relationship you need to create the environment that maybe your child needs, or the environment that you need to even yourself be able to move forward. That negative thinking can put a damper on that.
For sure. It's not about failing. It takes two, right? And things change, people grow. And who you are at the beginning of a relationship sometimes is not necessarily who you are when you become a parent. And as a matter of fact, it's really sometimes not who you should be. And I can speak to that from a very personal place. When I was a single woman dating, I'm very different than who I became the moment my son was born, right? So there was a lot of really different emotions and feelings around what I wanted to become as a mother. And that required who I was at the time as a girlfriend to be very different. And so the realization is we evolve and we grow as individuals, and we should learn how to do that as parents as well. So because you're not quite figuring out your groove yet, or it feels a little clumsy, it doesn't mean that you fail. It just also means that you're growing.
And sometimes you may have to give yourself some grace, because you're becoming someone new too. And maybe you have feelings about the place that you're in that are unresolved.
Yes.
And you're actively trying to work through those feelings, but then also probably show up as that parent, or show up in the way that your child needs you. But then you may not fully know who you are in this new space.
Yes, which is almost always the reality. If you are a first-time parent, you don't know who you are. You are really figuring it out as you go. I cannot stand that saying, like you're fixing the bike or the plane or whatever as you go. But that's really what parenting is. There's no right way, and a lot of us have a tendency to just kind of mimic what we saw growing up, which is sometimes what gets us in a really stuck place. And so it's okay to grow. It's okay to find your way. It's okay to, again, be comfortable being uncomfortable, because what is required is really constantly evolving. I mean, who you are as a parent when your child is 2, you won't be that parent when your child is 18. So you, as a parent, you got to be ready to take on that responsibility of continuously evolving.
And it's probably hard if you're someone that's used to always having the answers, or used to always having it figured out. And now you're in a space of something that you don't have all the answers to. Maybe you haven't navigated this space before. And then you have the child that's looking at you, expecting mom or dad to have the answers. And this is something that maybe mom or dad don't know, because it's a place that they've never been before.
And being a parent, you have big expectations, right? You want your child to be the very best version of yourself. And you put a lot of pressure sometimes on what that means and how to get there. And as a result of that, it can cause tension in the relationship. A lot of times children see that, and it's coming from a good place, but we have to be mindful that as we're, putting these really big expectations on ourselves, again, giving grace, you're learning while you're developing this person. And it is clumsy. It is clumsy.
Yeah. And let's see, Marge shared a comment here. Plenty of grace is needed.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to bring up, while we're on this topic, I'll bring up one of the comments, or one of the messages here from Liz Steen. She's the mediator and attorney that wasn't able to be with us today. One of the things that she offered, let me see if this is the one. Let's see, we'll start with, One of the things, and this might be kind of tough for people if you're just navigating a new space, is being able to say thank you or being cordial to your now former partner.
Yeah.
Because if you're still going through those feelings, she says, say thank you. Thank your ex every time you see them. It makes conversations go smoother. That may be tough to do when you're just, freshly divorced, freshly separated, freshly navigating this new space. You might have to take some time to get to that place where thank you is something you can say and maybe have something genuine in those feelings.
Yep, you're spot on. So I have part of the price dynamic in our toolkit. We talk about the dynamic 4, and that's about being respectful, being interested, being authentic, and being vulnerable. And one of the things about being authentic is exactly what you're saying is, in my mind, if you don't mean it, don't say it. So I love Liz's idea of saying thank you. And then, of course, finding a way to make sure that that's real, though. What are you thankful for? And so, because it's hard to sometimes, give compliments or blow hot air, you're in a space where everything is critiqued. And you're met with criticism quite a bit when you're first trying to figure out your flow of co-parenting, especially if it's around kind of a toxic breakup or divorce. And so it's important to be mindful of using your words wisely. So saying something like thank you could be, thank you for picking up our child from daycare today. And that's something that could be very genuine and authentic to say. But, thanking them for something that's not real or not what you really mean just causes more, tension.
And really, it sounds like that in itself, it's saying those words, thank you. It's 2 words, but it may take substantial growth for someone to be in a place where they can say those words, depending on the nature of that separation, the feelings that are still there as a result. That baby step may be a mountain moved to be able to say those words.
Yes. And as I mentioned, part of kind of our dynamic for being respectful, right? And so a lot of times when we talk about being respectful, people would assume that we're saying being respectful to your co-parent. And I use this as an opportunity to talk with the individual parent about what it means to respect yourself. So making sure that the way that you're communicating and the way that you're showing up is the way you want to be viewed. And if you're staying in that space, then it does help you to move in a way that is more positive, because you have to be mindful that you're modeling behavior that your children are going to see. And if they don't see it, they feel it. And so that is a really big thing, that energy, the tension. Sometimes you can cut with a knife, right? And so kids feel those things, and they're very in tune with how we show up. So if we're respecting ourselves in the way that we're interacting with our co-parent, then that's a really great first step to then moving on to being able to say things like thank you or showing up as your authentic self.
And it could make it tricky for a child even to show up as they are if they feel that tension between the parents. Absolutely. And maybe they feel one parent doesn't like the other parent and they don't know how to just exist in this new space. And your child shows up differently because the parents are showing up differently.
For sure. And it is a really hard space to be in. At the Price Dynamic, we do, one of the services we provide is supervised visitation. And so we're able to really see what children do when they're caught in the middle. And so I like to really make sure that we are putting our children first rather than putting them in the middle or considering it to be that they're center, right? But we watch children, leave one parent and say, I don't want to see the other parent that I'm going to visit, and then walk right in the door and they're hugging and kissing and I missed you so much, but they're saying what they think the other parent wants to hear. And so, they're modeling, those behaviors that they've seen, or they're picking up on, kind of that energy and that tension.
And to add on to that, here's something that Liz had shared, and we can talk about this too. Help
Yeah.
your child with a secure attachment to your ex. Children who are securely attached to their parents match that attachment style. I believe that's kind of what you're talking about, Alicia. And with their teachers, children who are insecurely attached with their parents will be insecurely attached to their teacher. So the insecure attached child will either avoid the teacher or be super demanding. Either way, it hurts their ability to learn and often makes them less popular with teachers and peers. So focus on building attachment if you can. If you can't because your ex disappeared or is a total jerk, then you get your child the support of a therapist as early as possible in the divorce process. What can you kind of add on to that there? Sometimes what the family is navigating may be too much for the parents to tackle alone, and it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you if you need help of a therapist. It just means recognizing that you can't fix it yourself and you're getting those support tools, right?
Very true. The other thing I love about this idea of healthy attachment and or being secure is that a lot of times when we're going through the emotional kind of roller coaster of what a divorce looks like or a breakup looks like or living in the household together and trying to figure out how to coexist as now parents, we vent to our children or we look to them to make us feel better. So when we're hurt, we might go to our children and hug them. We're crying, and then our kids are saying, oh, don't cry. And so they see a lot of that, which also helps to build that unhealthy attachment. And I think that's really what Liz is mentioning. We want to make sure that we're building healthy attachment to parents and adults. And so finding the right type of support so you're venting in the right way, and to people who actually can support you and help you is another really important piece. Not venting for the sake of venting and just talking, bad about the other parent and spewing those things out and not getting help, right? So it's just further perpetuating kind of that negativity.
And it's probably kind of tricky to navigate this new space because in some families, people don't talk about problems. They don't seek out help. It's not the norm. And so to go to a therapist or to go seek out a mental health professional is, oh my gosh, they're going to think I'm crazy. There must be something wrong with me. And instead of getting the resources and the tools that you can have in your kit to push you forward, push your changed relationship with your now former partner forward so that you can be successful in the now co-parenting relationship, it's like you're stuck in a circle of going around and around and around and ideas that are maybe too big for you to process alone.
Yeah.
And then in the end, your child is seeing you spinning, you're spinning, and you aren't getting the help that you need. So maybe some of it is just, creating the space where people feel comfortable seeking out help and knowing that there's nothing wrong with them if they need it, and there's nothing wrong with them if they do. In fact, you're strong because you're seeking out help. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of recognizing I'm tackling something that's too big for me to handle alone. I need help. Let me seek out help so that I can show up differently for my child.
For sure. We talk about that a lot. One of the dynamic four, again, is, being vulnerable. There is power and strength in vulnerability. And a lot of times when your co-parent is able to see you show that vulnerability, say, what you did, hurts me, or, I feel, disrespected by this particular behavior, and being really clear about what it is that you're going through. Sometimes that does help to change the tune of, the person who is actually offending you. And it's really important to learn in those spaces when you are being vulnerable about how to actually use your words. That's another piece that I like to share with people a lot. I'm big on communication and being really clear about what exactly you're feeling versus, just kind of these big blanket statements, because you can't get to the root of the problem when you're not being clear. And when we're mad, it's sometimes hard to be clear. So in that vulnerability, being really clear about what is hurting you.
And how important is it? I mean, people tell children all the time to, use their words and be careful about what you say. But when even adults are in those emotional spaces, the things that you tell children, they go out the door. And you have to be reminded as an adult of, how to communicate, how to use your words, how to navigate these spaces, because let's face it, we're all human. And when you're in a tough space, the most human aspects of how you feel show up, right?
Yep, so true. And I mean, very simple, like you said, use your words. And in the spaces that we're looking at, especially within the price dynamic, and we're working with a lot of families that have gone through the court system or are, dealing with high anxiety around, a lot of malicious kind of behaviors that they've, felt or have even, kind of done toward their other, toward the other parent. They're in this space where they're trying to now work through it and figure it out. And when you have others supporting you and working with you, and you're not effectively able to communicate what you need or what has happened, it just takes so much longer for that court process or for anyone who's helping you to really be able to get to the root of, what you're needing or what your children need. So using your words and being very clear is extremely important when you have other parties supporting you, especially through that court process.
So true. And if you're just joining us, right now we're talking about divorce and co-parenting here with Alicia Price of the Price Dynamic, offering some tips and tools for navigating your changed relationships. If you're going through divorce or you're trying to co-parent and you're trying to figure out how to navigate this new space, this is Alicia Price's specialty. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask, if this is a space that you might be navigating, certainly post those in the comments section below. And shortly we'll drop the link. So if you would like to come up via video and ask your question, we'll be able to do that shortly. Zenobia joining us here saying hello. Hi, Zenobia. Thanks for joining us. Alysha, I did want to ask you, what do you say to folks if they're saying, okay, I'm hearing everything that you're saying and I'm trying to get help for myself. I'm trying to go to therapy. I'm trying to do all the right things so that I can show up as my best self, even if this is a new self that I'm learning, but my best self, for myself, for my child. But my partner, my now ex-partner, isn't doing their part. They're not showing up. They're not trying to get help. They're not trying to work with me for the benefit of the child. How do I do what I need to do to, best position myself and really best position my child to succeed in this new dynamic?
Yeah. Two things. I like to start with self. So lots of times in this co-parenting space, people are really ready to blame the other parent. They're ready to say, I've done everything I need to do. It's just this other parent won't do X, Y, Z. So we like to, kind of funnel back to what do you have control over? What do you have the ability to do? And what you're asking of that other person, how important is it? Let's prioritize. Are there other support systems that you have right now? A paternal or maternal grandparent that's able to kind of step in and help. Accessing your village is huge with what we talk about through the price dynamic, because sometimes you need permission to say, I'm not trying to navigate this co-parenting thing right now. And that's okay. And also to be aware of other types of parenting styles. Lots of times people are pressuring themselves to be able to co-parent, and it may not be the safest thing to do. And that's a reality. There are some people that are trying to co-parent with individuals who, have been abusive, or it's an unsafe environment. And then we don't want to promote that. So sometimes, parallel parenting is also an option. And that is where you're able to, parent in the way that you need to in your household, and the other parent does what they need to in their household. And you're kind of doing those things simultaneously, but not talking about it really. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. And I think people need to hear that sometimes, that this pressure or the weight that's sometimes on us to partner and collaborate and, be a team is not possible sometimes, ever. for people. And that is a reality. And that doesn't mean you failed. It means that you have come to the realization that your family dynamic is, not quite what you thought it would be. And now how do we solve for or get you the right type of support moving forward? So we talk a lot about accessing your village.
Right, right. So we've got a couple of comments here. Let's see. Christian saying hello. And then we have Red Machine HD. I'm going through a divorce and she's trying to take the kids. I'm sure this is probably something you hear going both ways a lot. The person that comes to you in this space, where do you start? Where do you start that conversation when they're at the price dynamic?
Yeah. So in our particular organization, we start with, again, what can you do? What do you have power over? What do you have the control to do? Right. And so I like to focus first on individuals. And so we're able to do a lot of one-on-one coaching around what co-parenting looks like. And sometimes that means dialing it all the way back to the opportunity to really drain the swamp. And I like to say drain the swamp because sometimes people need to be heard and they need to just kind of get it out. What went wrong? And I need to, just kind of have the relief to say that. We don't dive too much into custody and or, who gets the kids, who doesn't get the kids. What our role is to help you to be whole and to help you heal so that when you're navigating those spaces, you're prepared, you're ready. So we work through things like, how do you present yourself in the best way? How are you not, sharing kind of that negativity around your children or with your children? A lot of co-parenting has to do with self. And people would sometimes like to think it has a lot more to do with getting their co-parent to do what they want them to do. And that's not what co-parenting is. And so we do a lot of education around, what is co-parenting? And is it something that you're, equipped to do, have the capacity to do and ready for? And sometimes when people come in and don't have the capacity to do that because they are hurt or they are angry, we take time to coach them as an individual and allow them to kind of drain the swamp.
So and that's kind of a question that I was thinking of. So if someone is at a place where they don't have the capacity to co-parent, you can't just stop being a parent and you can't stop working on it. So how do you get someone to the place where they can co-parent? Because they have to keep showing up for their kids. As your personal growth process continues, you have to still show up for your kids. Is it starting out as, okay, I'm dropping my child off and I'm not saying anything to them? Let's see if we can get to a place in a few months to where you can just say, thank you for picking up my child, and just getting to that space.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're hitting the nail on the head. Again, it's that, being comfortable, being uncomfortable. It doesn't happen fast. And a lot of times people want things to happen, very quickly and they want it their way. And that's when you're still in the space where you're not putting your children first. And so we dial it all the way back to, what is the common goal here? And it is to represent yourself well so that your children have whole and healed and healthy parents. So how do we do that? And we're constantly bringing it back to the focus of the child. So when we're in those spaces where parents are having a really hard time co-parenting, it's because they're focused more on their self. They're focused more on their personal feelings. We do a lot with, kind of talking through feelings versus facts. Being in the space of focusing on facts is, what are your children needing? And we can get really clouded in our own personal feelings and forget about the facts of, what it takes to actually care for your child.
Right. We've got a couple of comments here. Derek Francis says, sounds good. And Lavorne commenting, hey, ladies. Hi, Nikki, BFF. Thanks, Lavorne, for joining us today, too. So another point here, and I'm sure this is probably one that people kind of get to a place where they're trying to navigate this. Writing everything down ahead of time. I'm sure as you're working out your co-parenting relationship, maybe this comes before you say thank you in some cases. But one thing that Liz Steen, attorney mediator for divorce without court, offered is if you can budget your costs for a year to minimize awkward conversations like ballet class needs a deposit by Tuesday, planning ahead makes it easier. And if your ex avoids communication as a way to force you to do what they want, then send a time-sensitive text with a deadline. We need to have this in by Tuesday. So if I don't hear from you within 48 hours, I'm going to take the following action. For example, if you have to have ballet class deposit in by a certain time, then basically say, I'm counting on you for your half unless I hear from you in the 48 hours. Let me know. That flips it from I need to hear from you so we can, which is frustrating for you both.
Yep.
It seems like that's one of the tools you have to learn is just a more effective style of communication. So maybe you're not just in the position of just, I want them so that I can, like you're more leading the interaction and the exchange.
Yeah, it's extremely important. Co-parenting, what it boils down to is effective communication. And it is about being clear. I love that Liz mentioned, planning ahead, writing things out. I talk a lot about that in my book. Practicing what you will say. It might sound really funny, but I suggest to a lot of people to have a conversation with your co-parent while looking in the mirror. And if anything you say causes you to just kind of burst out laughing, you might want to leave that comment, in your pocket. Being really real with yourself about when you're antagonizing, when you're being sarcastic. There's a lot of things around, communication that cause dysfunction. And, that criticism or over exaggerating things that you're saying, when things are time sensitive, making it seem like it's, the end of the world, like there's no solution, contempt. So being very sarcastic, again, it's a hot button for a lot of people. And you have to remember, you've been in a relationship with this person in most cases. The reality is we do have some, co-parents that are trying to figure it out and have not been in a relationship. But most people have dealt with each other prior to having children, so they know what buttons to push. And so if you're planning ahead and you're mindful of the ways that you communicate and how to do that, it causes you to be triggered less. And so those are the things that are really important. And so when you're focusing on yourself, how you show up, respecting yourself, how you're going to communicate, it causes the other person to kind of get in line. And that way you're not having to tell them what to do or how to do things. You're more focused on your own behavior.
Right. And I'm going to quickly bring up a comment here. This is from Marge again. She says, I think it's important to remember we are on the same team and to do what's in the best interest of our children, regardless of our feelings. Most times we let our ego and pride get in the way.
Yep.
Thanks for sharing that, Marge.
Yes. Thanks, Marge. I believe Marge is one of my Facebook friends.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks for joining us today, Marge.
Yes, I love it. But that's cool. I mean, our ego, our pride gets in the way. And again, that's based on, already having had a relationship with that person. That how to push buttons, when you know a person. And then also, though, you don't want to be in this kind of space or being trapped in assuming because you know them how they will respond. That's another, kind of space we talk about is having a conversation with your co-parent before you've had it. I'm not going to say this because I think they'll say that. You don't know that. If you're allowing a person to grow and you expect them to see you differently, then you have to give that same grace to your co-parent as well.
And sometimes it's so easy to live in your head with what you think someone is going to do or what you think they're going to say. But the reality is, if in some cases this is the first time you've been through a divorce, you really don't know what to expect because this is new for you, and maybe it's new for your ex-partner, and you all don't really know who you are in these spaces. And so you're, trying to guess how someone might respond in a situation that both of you have never been in.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
very, especially for those who are first-time parents. The
Mm-hmm.
other thing that's really important to mention is, for individuals who have multiple children together and then separate, each child requires something different. And so being mindful of that is extremely important as well. I mean, you have children that are in different, extracurricular activities, children that have different emotional or social and emotional needs, education requirements, maybe different schools. So it is truly about putting your children's needs first and not focusing on yourself. You can only imagine how much a child will miss out on if they have a lot of different support needs and parents are not focused on that, but they're focused on you getting smart with me. You're being sarcastic, and a lot of people get stuck there.
Mm-hmm. And I can only imagine the tightrope that must be, just
Mm-hmm.
the emotional toll of navigating the relationship with my partner is different. And then on top of that relationship with your partner being different, your children are individually experiencing this new relationship too. And then on top of that, they're probably asking you questions and looking to you for guidance and clarity. And it's really something that maybe you don't have those clear answers. So I guess there's no clear way to bring peace to the child in a situation that is new for you too. But then the trauma that maybe comes with the separation of, a family dynamic that they've maybe known for their entire childhood. Now all of a sudden it's different and they don't know how to experience that. You don't know how to experience it either. But then they're looking to you for guidance. The I guess thought in my mind, I don't have kids, but just the idea of your child looking to you to be that person that has all the answers, that has it all figured out, and you can't give them that.
Right.
How do you, I guess, what do you do? What do you say to a child? Are you that honest with them and just say, we're figuring it out? Or do you succumb to that pressure of just, saying something and hoping you can grow into the words that are coming out of your mouth?
My recommendation would be the first is definitely to be honest, but being honest in a time where you're able to show up as emotionally stable. So honest and, bawling and crying, I don't know what to do, is not helpful for a child. But being honest and saying, we're figuring this out together. As a family, we're figuring this out. This is new for me also. You would not believe how much grace children have for their parents. They love them through all of it, right? And so if you're able to say to them, I don't have it figured out, I'm hurt right now and I want to be better, I want to do this better, children will give you the space to grow. Another thing I'd love to be able to share is that I created this product called the Family Meeting Cards, and I love it as a tool for exactly what you're talking about. We don't have it figured out. And the cards are able to be used with a family where you're able to just kind of walk through and the questions are there on the cards, and it supports you to have effective communication as a family and or to make decisions together. And a lot of times when we're in these relationships where we're separating, we fall into the roles that we're used to, right? Like, who is the person who kind of made all the decisions in the household? So we defer to that person. But that could be a core reason why the marriage or the relationship ended. So you don't want to continue that pattern. So these cards help you to really remove the authority from that conversation, and it allows kids to be a part of it as well, to say, what do you think, or how are you feeling about what's happening? And sometimes when we're caught up in our own emotion, we forget to ask our kids, what would they suggest? And sometimes they see the answer a lot more clear than the parents. And you would be surprised when you ask them, what do you think we should do? And they'd say, well, hey, you know what? Dad can pick me up because he gets off of work at this time. And you don't have to do that. I mean, they can see it because they're a little bit more removed, right? They're on the balcony.
Mhm.
And
Right.
so it's important to bring your kids into it if you want them to heal with you and to grow with you in the process.
Absolutely. I wanted to bring up one other point
Yeah.
from Liz here, if you give me just a moment.
Yeah.
And I think this is one when people are further along in their um, separation and their journey.
Yes.
Here's one where she says, you can suggest that the two of you tell each other if an adult is spending the night while your child is there. Most parents want to know if someone is around their child. Overall, though, new relationships usually trigger a lot of conflict. So expect and plan for some bumps when you bring in a new dating partner, and give yourself extra support when your ex introduces a new dating partner. To minimize this, tell your dating partner to stay out of the relationship with your ex. They should give you support only and never comment or tell you what to do. You don't need to navigate two sets of expectations at once. It will be overwhelming to you, and it's a sign of poor boundaries when someone you're dating wants to get into your parenting and interfere with your relationship with your ex. Keep those boundaries in place, and if your ex lets their new partner interfere, just know that those boundaries are in place. And if your ex lets their new partner interfere, just know that relationship is probably not going to last, or if it does, it's not a good one, and both of them are stressed. Again, a therapist can really help your kids if the other parent is not managing their love life in a positive way and dates someone toxic who tries to get involved.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is absolutely a word.
Yeah.
It is really, in my own personal opinion and experience, it is extremely important to make sure whomever you're dating understands their role in your life and finds theirself, kind of separate from your co-parenting dynamic until you're married to that person. So if they're not a step, parent, or it's not a long-term relationship, you want to be mindful of taking the advice of into every person that you might be dating or introducing them to your children. I also agree with Liz being, upfront about having someone who you're dating or someone around your children is extremely important. You don't want to hear that from your child. You need to be able to hear those things from your co-parent. And it does just set the tone for how you want to move forward. 9 times out of 10, that parent who has, is dating someone new wants to be treated the exact same way when their co-parent introduces a new person into their life. So to lead by example is extremely important because it will happen to you. So that's important to remember. Lots of times, just as a blanket statement, whomever's trying to get over the relationship the quickest or first, they're in another relationship. And they might not be thinking about how they introduce that relationship could then be what happens to them. So it's important to lead by example.
Absolutely. And really, parents, but it's probably changing the dynamic as well when one person maybe gets into the relationship before the other person. So one has someone, the other person doesn't have anyone. And but then they're not completely, over the split. And then the kids have to go and navigate the new partner. And, the parent is still trying to process, my ex has someone new. And then you're trying to stay composed for the kids while these new dynamics are being introduced.
Yep. And so again, that's why I mentioned about kind of accessing your village, finding people around you who have either gone through what you're going through and you find that they're in a spot in a positive space, that they've healed. I think it's important to, of course, go into therapy if you need to. Seek out a coach, someone who you can talk through these things with, an elder in your community. For some people, it may be your pastor, but access the right type of support so you are able to effectively talk through what those emotions are.
Absolutely. And we've got about 10 minutes left to go here. And if you have any questions or anything that you would like to ask, if anything that we're talking about today resonates with something you're navigating in your life, or maybe someone you know might be navigating, certainly share those remarks in the comments section, and we will ask any questions that you might have of Alysha while we still have her for about 10 more minutes. Alysha, are there any points that we haven't touched on that you feel people need to hear as it relates to navigating this space, giving themselves grace and understanding that the relationship that you have is a new one?
Yes.
When you are separated, and you have to learn what that relationship is and how that relationship is going to work for you too.
Yep. Being open to having a new relationship with your co-parent is extremely important. They're not going anywhere. And so you need to be mindful of what a new relationship can look like. But I also want to touch on when we are venting or when we are looking for support. Be very particular and cautious about who in your life you share your ups and downs with. As you grow with your co-parent and you get to this space where you are able to work together, you don't want to have already told all of the ups and downs to your family and to friends, so that when you finally feel you're able to co-parent, they're now spewing all of those negative things, or reminding you how you felt or how you were hurt back to you when you're no longer in that space. So you want to be talking to people who are able to truly support you through, kind of this evolution of what it means to become a co-parent. There's nothing worse than, venting to a friend, and as soon as you forget about what happened, they're reminding you of that pain. And I see that happen a lot. And there's some people who are around that, are unhappy. And they're, kind of putting that, negative energy onto you. So be mindful of who you share your business with as you're divorcing, as you're breaking up, or as you're working through co-parenting.
Absolutely. And we've got about 8 minutes left here. If you are just joining us, we are talking about divorce and co-parenting, navigating those changes in your relationship. Not only the changes to the relationship, how you are going through a change too, learning how to navigate who you are in this new dynamic, but also how to effectively parent in this space as well. All of those are things that we're talking about today. And if this is a space that you've navigated, or a space that you could offer some insight in as well, we would love to hear from you. Marge shared some comments again with this earlier. They're talking about it's important to remember we are on the same team and to do what's in the best interest of our children, regardless of our feelings. Most times we let our ego and our pride get in the way, and probably have to get to a place where you've worked through the hurt, worked through the pain, worked through the strongest of the feelings that you have. Just get it all out. I think that's how we started our conversation tonight, is getting it all out, so that now you can say, okay, I'm not carrying that anymore. How do we move from here? And you have to go through and unpack the painful stuff sometimes, so that you can heal and can grow and can be in that place where you can be a better person and a better parent.
So true. And if we, back up a bit and think about, I'm unpacking and getting to a place where I can be whole and I can be healed, because you're now the person your children look up to. And so if you don't do that work, the pain that you feel your children will feel. It is almost, if I'm remembering correctly, about 50% of the children that are from a divorced family grow up to then divorce, or watch their parent then have a second relationship that ends in a breakup. So we're in this cycle. Once it starts, it's a cycle. And our children repeat the same types of things that they've seen us do. And if you don't want your children to experience that, then do the work now. Do the work now. A first step also around co-parenting is forgiving. Whether or not you need to forgive your co-parent for how your relationship ended, or you need to forgive yourself for what you did as a result of the relationship, falling apart or causing the relationship to fall apart. You need to forgive yourself. It's key. And a lot of people think, oh, forgiveness, but no, it is really, really important to think through, what do I need to forgive myself for? And I've shared quite a bit with clients that I had to forgive myself for the ways that I changed and the person that I had grew to become as a parent. It was very different than who I was when I became pregnant. And so I had to forgive myself for ignoring that and for just expecting my co-parent to, see me in the same light, or to be on the same journey that I was on. And so you got to do the work and get really real with yourself about what that looks like. The other thing I'll add, I'm a co-parent, and I truly believe this because my parents were co-parents. I did not prioritize marriage. My parents weren't married. And so if you think about the way you became a parent and how your upbringing had, a hand in that, it will help you to put things in perspective around now what you're doing that's creating what your child will do. And while my parents did a great job at co-parenting, I, was not a product of marriage. And so for me, what I prioritized was being friends with my co-parent. And we did that well, and we do that well to this day. And so I am grateful that friendship was a foundation for us. However, again, I didn't come from a household where my parents were married. So it's important to remember that our children are watching us and they will model what they see.
So true. And such excellent point to end on today. Alicia Price with the Price Dynamic. I appreciate you joining us today for such an important conversation. The focus of this space and Let's Chat is to create space to have meaningful conversations, because not everybody feels comfortable going to sit and talk to a therapist or seeking out help, or maybe they don't always maybe have a friend or someone that they can ask. So creating space to have conversations that push people forward is the thinking behind Let's Chat and why I wanted to create this space for others. We do have some great topics that are going to be coming up in the next few weeks. Next Friday, we're going to be talking about something that may hit folks a little close to home coming out of the year that we've just been tackling with the pandemic: changing careers, feeling the fear, and doing it anyway. The last year, people saw their hours cut. Maybe they lost a job. Maybe their financial situation today looks much different than it did a year ago. And so they're navigating a new space, trying to determine, where do I go from here? Well, we're going to hear some stories from people who are career changers. Some of them, college wasn't immediately their plan when they left high school. And the things that they wanted from them for themselves, they were financially out of reach. Well, just by trying some new things, expanding, and a willingness to take some chances and grow, they have now created financially for themselves an opportunity to go to college, to grow, and to create and carve out their own lane and their own space in a way that they never imagined that they would be able to do 5 years ago. So that's going to be an exciting conversation we're having. And then after that, on September the 10th, we're going to be talking about the cost of personal growth. Sometimes when you grow and you move to new places and new spaces, your thinking that your friend group's going to come along with you, and those same folks that were with you at the beginning of the journey, they're going to be with you as your journey evolves. Well, not everybody can grow with you in the way that you're growing. And sometimes there's a little bit of a grieving process there, because you had these hopes and these visions for those folks being in your life in a way that you're coming to realize they just can't be there. So we're going to talk about the cost of personal growth. It's not that you stop growing, you keep growing, but navigating those changes in your relationships. That's coming up on September the 10th. And then on September the 17th, we're going to be talking about creating space for conversation. Talking to people who are doing what I'm doing here, creating space to have meaningful conversations with folks, but their topics are centered around different things, as far as sharing the mic, with Jasmine Stringer, creating space for women of color to be heard, and navigating social media as a forum to do that. And then we've got some other folks, JC Lippold and Jesse Ross, as well as Erica Jones, that'll be joining us to share how they're creating space for others as well. And then on October the 1st, I'm super excited about this conversation. It's on crafting a new life. We will have several ladies joining us, all immigrants, all here, carving out what the American dream means to them. And they've found some tremendous success over the years, and they will share what crafting a new life means for them, how they've been able to grow and build the businesses and careers that they have, and then the lessons that they've learned along the way. So I'm really looking forward to sharing the space with them too, and so many other dynamic folks that'll be joining us as we make our way through the year. Thank you all so much for being a part of this conversation. Thank you, Alicia, for joining me today and sharing your incredible insight with the price dynamic. Hopefully some of what we discussed today resonates with folks that are navigating this space. And if you know someone who might benefit from hearing some of the words that we discussed today, certainly click and share this video, because the idea is to grow and connect and help people be moved forward in whatever phase of life and whatever journey that they're in. So thanks so much for joining us. Alicia, if you could hang around here, I'll wrap up the broadcast and I'll talk to you in the backstage area, and I'll see everyone else later. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.